Hello, welcome everyone. It's great to have you here. I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes for people to join, but we're so glad to have you with us this afternoon. Just take a moment, settle in, grab yourself a water, maybe get comfortable. We'll be starting properly in just a few minutes, and I can't wait to dive into today's session with you all. It is going to be a good one. So just a little reminder what you signed up for, because if you're anything like me, you sign up for loads of things and then you join and you think, oh yeah, what was this one again? So this is a fantastic webinar today that we're bringing to you called The Half-Life Problem. Your members are decaying on schedule. So we're joined by Jillian Bejtlich, who is Director of Community plus Developer Advocacy at Times, as she introduces the half-life model. Really exciting. So it's a new way to understand member disengagement as predictable life cycle and not a failure. But before we dive into it, Jillian, I'm really interested to see where everyone is joining us from today. So everyone who's online, if you could share your location in the chat, you'll find that box to the right of your screen. I would love to know where everyone is dialing in from. Okay, I can see India, I can see Spain, the UK, fantastic. Sri Lanka, the USA, NYC, love it. Edinburgh. Yeah, get sharing in the box, everyone. I want you to get really comfy for that, because that is going to be where you're submitting your questions for Jillian as well today. So yeah, if you're just joining us now, we're just all sharing exactly where we're dialing in from, which is super exciting. I just wanted to shout out Gainsight actually before we get started. So a big thank you to Gainsight for supporting our Talks and Pros series. Their support helps us bring these sessions to life. So go and check out their website and learn more. I also wanted to let you know about some upcoming events led by Community. So on August the 27th, which is this week, there is the Community Builders Co-working Day in London. There's also an AI sharing notes, what we're testing and learning session. And there's also new tools for discourse communities, which is on September the 2nd. So check those events out if you haven't already. And a little bit of housekeeping for you as well. As we go through this session, feel free to drop your questions for Jillian in the chat at any time. We'll be picking out the questions and we'll be addressing them all at the end. There will also be a recording available on our website for you to visit at any time. So without further ado, it's time to introduce the lovely Jillian, who, as I just mentioned a moment ago, is the Director of Community plus Developer Advocacy at Times. Jillian has extensive experience building and working with communities across industries and community types. She's particularly passionate about the intersection of community, data, and user behavior, using data and community design to understand what drives engagement and better experiences. Jillian, the floor is yours. What a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much.
So happy to be here. Really appreciate it. All right. Well, let's get into it. So as mentioned, if you have any questions as we go, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. Really excited to kind of chat with all of you. And as we go, if you see anything and you're like, gosh, Jillian, I'd like to chat with you later, please do. I'm super easy to find on LinkedIn. I'm the only person in the world with my name. So I'm very easy to find. You don't need to worry about connecting with the wrong person. So let us get into it. So your members are decaying on schedule. That is literally the subtitle of my presentation. It is the description of my presentation. And it's not a metaphorical thing. It's actually not a cautionary tale. This is very much a talk about physics and about how we've been fighting a law of nature by trying to send a re-engagement email. So that's kind of what we're doing. As mentioned, though, I'm Jillian. I run Community and Developer Advocacy at Times, which is an automation company. It's a really cool company. I'm very much enjoying working there. And I also write a Substack called The Community Nerd, which is kind of where I ramble on a weekly basis about the architecture and psychology of communities. So if you like what you hear today and you want more nerdiness and more of my rambling, please do go check it out. Okay, so I have been told that there is a little bit of a delay here, but I'm going to ask you all to kind of chime in the chat here, which is I want you to raise your hand, drop a comment, whatever y'all want to do. If you have ever been asked to explain why engagement is down in your community. So just however you want to react to that is fantastic. My bet is, once this gets going and I start seeing some sort of activity in the chat, is that this is a very universal experience. I have been working on communities for about 20 years now, and I would say that every community I have been in at some point has been asked the question of, hey, why is engagement down and what are you going to do about it? And it usually is accompanied by a dipping chart. Someone has gone into my community metrics or somehow gone into one of my dashboards, and they've decided to pull a conclusion all on their own, which is always such a good time, and they want to know why they're seeing what they're seeing. Now, the second part to this is, have you been approached like this was a crisis? Is this something where leadership was like, oh my God, like we've got to figure this out? You know, you're in that meeting, someone's looking at it, kind of doing one of these, you can kind of see that alarmed, scared look. And suddenly there is a task force to address this issue, which is always super fun because you have 9 gazillion other issues that you've already flagged and no one wanted to help you. But this one, friends, we're definitely gonna attack this one. The panic is actually really understandable though. And the response though is almost always wrong. And that is what I find so freaking fascinating. So I'm gonna spend the next few slides trying to kind of explain this and all of that good stuff. Okay, so your re-engagement campaign is almost definitely a waste of money. I gave this presentation while I was in London, and it was really funny because I saw some horrified, pearl clutching moments in the audience because people are like, "What do you mean? Like, what do you mean I've wasted money?" And it's kind of scary to think of that. But there's an asterisk here, and that asterisk is doing a whole lot of work here. I made some assumptions when I made this statement, and these assumptions are based on the type of communities that I work with. So they're variables that I can assume in the type of work that I do. So these are things like the community is in the B2B or SaaS space. Your members join because they have a job to do and the product helps them do it. And the primary reason for being in the community is support and knowledge, not because they love spending time in your platform specifically. A really good example of this, I use Airtable and Canva a ton. And yes, while I adore those products and I like to think of myself as being a very passionate user and definitely even an advocate, I don't spend much time in their communities. I only go into their communities when I'm trying to up-level my skills, solve a specific issue, something like that. So if I am describing you and I'm describing your community, I want to make the case that most re-engagement campaigns are treating a symptom while completely misdiagnosing the disease. We're not losing people in our communities because we failed them. We're losing them because they actually succeeded. And we right now don't have a great framework for understanding that. So that being said, this is the framework. This is the playbook that we all love and we all know. And it's really funny. Every time I've given this presentation, I can see people pulling up their phones or taking screenshots right now. Don't do that. I'm actually telling you what not to do with this specific slide. These are all great strategies for specific situations, but for re-engagement specifically, it might not be the right answer. These are things like retention dashboards, re-engagement campaigns, win-back sequences, badges and gamification, looking at the percentage of active members, engagement rate, all of that fun jazz. Now, all of these tactics assume the exact same thing, which is that a member going quiet is a problem to be solved. That engagement is a stable state. Like this is something that should always, always, always exist. And that when it drops, something obviously broke. But what if that assumption is actually just wrong? We treat engagement like a sport. Like if we just coach harder, or if we run the right play, or hustle enough in the fourth quarter, or I don't know, sports ball, we can win. But engagement isn't a sport. I think it's a science. I feel very, very passionate about that. Now, in science, what's really important to understand is that things transfer energy. This is kind of like the basis of science, is almost kind of the study of energy. Now, when things transfer energy, that is not failure. That's just what we call thermodynamics in some specific situations. So I want to introduce a different mental model, and this one borrows from nuclear physics. And I can't believe how many times this year I've gotten to talk about nuclear physics. on a stage. So I'm loving this. I'm a nerd at heart, engineering degree, all that stuff. So for me, this is exciting. But I think this nuclear physics model I'm about to show you actually really explains what's happening to your member base, anything better than we have in our existing community playbook. So you ready for it? Okay. So this is radioactive decay. I'm going to explain radioactive decay to all of you. Radioactive decay describes how unstable atoms lose energy over time. And the formula for that is actually in the middle of this slide right here. All you really need to know, if you're kind of sitting here going, oh my God, Jillian's bringing up math that I did in college and I don't want to think about it. All you need to know is that A is how much mass you start with, X is how much time has passed, and Y is how much you have left at any given moment. It doesn't matter what unstable atom you throw in here, it is always the same. It is super, super, super wonderfully predictable, and we love that. And because of that, the curve is predictable. The curve is always going to look like this no matter what you do. The shape doesn't change based on how hard you try to stop it. And importantly, the more mass you start with, the longer the substance exists before it becomes negligible. Now, what's important here, and this is what I want you all to wrap your brain around, is that you would never look at an unstable atom and be like, you failed, bad atom, like just doesn't happen. The substance doesn't fail. It decays on a schedule, and that schedule is baked into its nature. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so now let's bring this back over to the world of community. Now we're going to swap out mass for need. That's the whole model. Goodbye, I'm done. I've done my entire presentation. Just kidding. Members join your community with a very specific level of need. They're uncertain about your product. They have questions they can't answer yet, workflows that they haven't figured out. And in B2B especially, that need is often super freaking high at the beginning. I mean, think about the last time someone handed you a new community platform you didn't know, or a new data visualization tool that you'd never used before. Your need was sky freaking high at the very, very beginning. And that's because you're trying to get value out of it really quickly. I mean, this is especially evident when it's a work tool because we don't have time to be just goofing off and seeing if we figure it out. We have to figure it out like yesterday. Now, the formula becomes the new formula here in the middle of the slide. As you can see, I've swapped out A for N, need. Need decays over time. And the more need that a user arrives with, the longer their meaningful community engagement window. And here's what I love. This curve is predictable. It is not random. But most of us have been treating it like a mystery. Ta-da, it's not. So let's kind of keep digging into this. This is what it looks like in practice. So you have members arrive with that super high uncertainty, which is this spot right here. They post, they ask, they engage, community helps. That's the left side of the curve. It's the side of the curve that we love, we adore. It is where us community professionals absolutely, shine. Now, as time passes, a user's confidence grows, which is interesting. We should actually put that curve on here too. They figure out the product. They don't need to ask as many questions. They start lurking more. I mean, this is something I've actually discovered in my own behavior. I recently onboarded to Discourse, and I was asking so many questions at the start. And nowadays, I'm only Googling things and going to their pages and reading stuff. I'm no longer asking questions because my confidence has grown enough that I can just lurk. I have figured out the product. Your customers figure out the product. They don't need to ask as many questions. They start lurking more. They engage less. And that is the middle here. This is kind of like this fun spot over here. And eventually, this is the part that we don't talk about enough. Their uncertainty resolves to a point where the primary value of community to them specifically is essentially zero. And this is where the alarmed looks, the, oh my gosh, the community is failing feels, they all happen. But the reality is that at this point, you have a competent user, which if you think about this from a sales perspective, a customer success perspective, we call that a success, which is so strange that we're looking at it as a failure, they're looking at it as a success. So something's clearly misaligned. So needless to say, if your customer is no longer using your community because you have gotten to this point, that is a success story. We just didn't have the language to really explain this. So here's where it all kind of gets important. The green zone over here, did not mean to click that. That is the bulk of a member's community life. This is where your investment in them has the absolute highest return. Like if you think about the spot where you need to engage them, provide value, everything like that, this is the spot to do it. But what's scary about this is that window opens very early in their life cycle, frankly, probably even before they even purchase your product. And then it closes on its own schedule, depending on the amount of need from that specific user. Now, the gray zone over here, this is where we normally break out that re-engagement playbook. But here's the thing I want you to just kind of like marinate in for a moment. Decay is proof that the community worked. Like that this is a great thing. We want to see that this happen. If your users are disengaging because they've learned what they needed to learn, you have done your job. Running a win-back campaign to get them back into the community they've already graduated from, that's not community management. That is, unfortunately, kind of emotional attachment. All right? So I guess my next question for all of you, which I am noticing the chat is a little bit delayed, so hey, whatever, is I want all of you to think about how many of you are currently running or recently have run some sort of re-engagement campaign. I'm going to bet it's a few of you. I will say even myself right now, I'm being asked to do a community launch. That's kind of funny because it's not entirely aligned with the behaviors and how my customers are onboarding, but hey, whatevs. Keep that thought in your head. Now, the next thought I want you to kind of run through is how many of you actually have data that these re-engagement campaigns have worked? Like something where you can actually point to a number and be like, yes, we brought back 23% of our disengaged population or whatever it was. And they stuck around for 18 months, like something meaningful, not just this many people clicked on the link. That gap between what you did and how it worked and actually having that proof is a huge problem. We run these campaigns because they're in the playbook. We don't run them because we actually have evidence that they work and that they generate sustained engagement from the peoples who need have genuinely expired. So let's get into like the next section of good stuff, which is what do we actually do with all this theoretical knowledge? So there are two things I want you to kind of hold on to, kind of grab them and just be like, I got this. First, focus on what you know. This is super, super important. Communities are loaded to the freaking brim with unknowns. This is just the nature of getting humans together. There's a whole concept of social physics. There are a lot of things we do know. There's a lot of things we understand about human psychology and sociology and, even just kind of mob mentality. And like, we don't know exactly when each member's need peaks. We don't know their exact engagement window. That uncertainty can really tip us into analysis paralysis. And even for someone who's been in this space for 20 years, I get tipped into this all the time. I'm like, oh, okay. But the reality is that what grounds me and what should ground you is that you know a lot, okay? You are awesome. You are brilliant. You look fantastic today, and you know a lot. You know what a new member looks like. You know what questions come up in the first 30 days of a new member's life. And you know when engagement tends to drop off, okay? So if I were to sit you down right now over a glass of wine and have a meaningful heart-to-heart conversation with you, you know the answers to these things, okay? I want you to use those as anchors. I want you to make educated assumptions, and then I want you to test them. And no, you may not always be right. Maybe something where 80% of the time, you're right. But 20% of the time, you are hilariously wrong. Don't wait for a perfect model, though, before you act. Just get at it. Send it. Second of all, design for the masses. This is something that I always find super fascinating, is that communities sometimes, we tend to over-segment. We tend to try to attract, that little tiny 0.03% of the community because maybe they seem really important to us. But the reality is you have limited time, you have a limited budget, you have limited cognitive load. You can't build a bespoke journey for every member segment you could theoretically identify. I want you to focus on the segments that have the biggest influence on the right outcomes, so the desired behaviors. And right now, based off of everything I've just showed you in the previous however many slides, that is almost certainly your newest members. 3 things to stop. This is also super fun. I always feel kind of bad telling people like, don't do that, because it makes it sound like I'm an expert. I'm not. But hey, I'm the one presenting, so I guess I get to tell you something. First off, stop aggregating members without context. Aggregating active member counts are almost meaningless without knowing what cohort you're looking at and how long they've been around. A member who joined 6 months ago being very quiet is absolutely wildly different from a member who joined last month or last week and then being quiet. Measure with data boundaries and actually figure out, where does activity actually indicate in relation to a specific hypothesis? To kind of give you an example here, so as I said, I'm in the process of standing up a new community. We're a month into our soft launch. And I just recently had someone ask me about my engagement metrics. And it was really funny because I have had the community technically up and running for 2 months. Month 1 was with my employees. Month 2, it's actually been public. Month 1, we had over 100 posts. We had almost 200 people sign up for community. Woo, looked beautiful. Month 2, I think I've had 50 posts and I've had 60 people sign up. That looks like an absolute failure, right? So if you're looking at that on a dashboard without any context, you're like, wow, Jillian, you're already terrible at your job. The reality is that month 1 was seeding. Month 1 was very specific behavior. It was things that I was asking my coworkers to do. It was a matter of us going in there and getting the community ready for prime time. Month 2 was focused on now getting members in there and allowing them to kind of start exploring without drowning them in conversations that, we might have wanted to have. So context, folks, context. The second one is stop re-engaging by default. Make it a deliberate, justified choice, not a reflex, okay? So when you see the chart doing this, don't just be like, I got to do this thing. Think about it. If you're going to run a re-engagement campaign, you need to have a hypothesis about why these specific members still have unmet need. Because they actually might. Like, one thing I get asked a lot is, well, how do I get my super users back in? How do I get my most advanced users back in? You need to figure out what they don't have, and you need to cater to that. Just reminding them that the community exists is not going to be enough. Otherwise, you are spending time and budget on people who have successfully graduated. This would be like running a college class and telling everyone who already has their PhD and is off doing things that they need to come back in or you'll fail them. They're not going to come back. They've already sailed. And the third one, stop reporting member decline as a crisis. I personally try very, very, very freaking hard to not report on member count metrics at all. In the specific communities that I work on, they don't signal any true behavioral value. So the next time someone sends you a chart of monthly active members trending down, your first response should be, compared to what? Like, what are we looking at? Is there a specific time? Is there a specific type of user? What's the time period? Against what behavioral objectives? That's not deflection. That's just you asking the right question and then bringing your expertise into action. Okay. And 4 things I want you to start. These are the things where when you go off today, you sign off this call and you're like, I guess I should go do something. These are the things I want you to do. First off, faster onboarding to value. The high engagement window, we now know that this opens super, super, super freaking early and it closes on its own schedule. You need to compress the time between just joined and I got something out of this. That is really, really important. Like, if you can do that in the first week, that is fantastic. Every day of confusion at the start of participation is something you're not going to get back. There's no way to get that back. Like, that time has passed, that atom has decayed. You got to do what you got to do. More intentional connections. Relationships form in the first 90 days are going to be the ones that stick. It is really hard to get that back later. Stop leaving that to chance. If there are connections, interactions, implosions, whatever that you can manufacture, make sure that that's happening. Some things could be like, structured introductions, cohort-based onboarding, making sure that new members actually talk to a human somewhere in the beginning of their process. Align content and programming. Early stage members are going to have early stage problems. This is always an interesting one to me. I actually just recently wrote an article about this on the Community Nerd, which is that when we try to make a community too advanced, it's actually going to alienate our new members because they're going to think that their question is too stupid. The people in the middle are going to be like, well, I'm too smart for this. And you end up having a really inactive community. So it's really, really important to make sure that your content calendar is segmented by what your member needs, not just how long that they've been around. And finally, give execs the right language. This one is probably the most practical thing I can tell you, which is when you go into a presentation, you send out an email, you post a Slack update, whatever it is that you're doing over there, you need to make sure that you're using the right words to get the right actions. It's not me telling you to fudge it, but what I am telling you is you can swap things like aggregate active members for cohort retention rate. It's effectively measuring the same way, but it's making sure that you're measuring the right segment of users and you actually have something to say about it. You're not leaving it up to chance. You can also swap things like engagement is down versus this cohort's participation rate by tenure is less than the previous one. You're not asking leadership to care less about numbers. You're just asking them to care about better ones. And that is a way easier sell than, don't stop panicking or stop panicking. We don't need a, group to figure this out. All right. So what I want to leave you with is this. Decay is inevitable. If science has told us anything, and gosh, we have a lot of science knowledge out there, way more than community knowledge, decay is inevitable. But better design is not. Better design does not just happen by accident. You cannot stop the decay. You cannot win back your way out of physics. No atom is ever going to care about your re-engagement campaign. But you can make the most out of the window of opportunity that exists. And you can design for the members who are actually at the peak need right now. And you can stop burning energy trying to resuscitate engagement in people who have simply moved on, graduated, and are wildly successful. So there you go. Decay is inevitable. Better design is not. And now I think we get to move into questions.
Oh, fantastic session, Jillian. I really, really enjoyed that. I've never actually thought about it in that way before, but hearing you explain it was like a little light bulb going off in my head. So thank you. I really, really enjoyed that. And I'm sure everyone online did too. To everyone who's listening, this is your moment to submit your questions for Jillian. We have had a few come in, which I'm really grateful for. So thank you for sharing those in the chat. And we're going to work through those now. We've got about 10, 15 minutes to go through some questions. So our first question for you today, Jillian, is from Layla Vaughn. The community I'm building is not for B2B or SaaS. It's for alumni who complete a B2C learning and development program. Curious to know if this talk applies to that too.
Yeah, I would say it does. It's going to be a slightly different model. And I think the best way to think about those specific users is they're made up of multiple atoms. And those atoms are going to behave differently. They're going to need your community at different points in their journey. A great example of this, I had recently talked to someone who stood up a community for people who had been let go. They were looking for jobs. And the reality is that I think for a lot of us across our career, we're going to unfortunately experience that multiple times. But when we're gainfully employed, we don't need that community. Or when we're comfortable, we're not going to need that community or something like that. And so what I would challenge you to do is think about your customer lifecycle and how you make sure that when they need you, you are able to serve that need and that they know that you exist. So it's almost kind of like saying like, hey, I see you're an atom. I'd love to use your atom. I know you have a need, and making sure that they're prepared and aware of that. A lot of different ways to handle that. I mean, I think for someone who might be inactive, it might be, don't email them every week. It's a really good chance that they're probably going to unsubscribe. But if you know that they're gainfully employed, send them a quarterly email. Make sure that they remember that you're out there. And then when they do need you, that's when you have more frequent re-engagement aspect to it.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Thank you, everyone, for the stuff that you're putting into the chat. That's fantastic to see. Okay, so our next question is from Sina. Curious to know how you convey decay to leadership when they don't see it the same way.
So in my specific world right now, I usually like to equate it back to customer success and support, which is always funny because then you see the light bulbs go off and they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. A customer that is happy, settled, adopted, all that good stuff submits way less support tickets than someone who is brand new or pissed off. And so it's really like, if you kind of can explain to them, just be like, if the community is serving this need, we're not going to see that type of behavior. If you want them participating in your community, though, for something else, that need needs to be there. And there also needs to be enough value in what you're asking them to do. So like a really good example of this, in the community that I'm in right now, we have 2 products. One of them is brand freaking new. In fact, I think tomorrow will be a month since we launched the product, and therefore a month since we launched community. And then we have a product that we've had out for, 8 years at this point. Needless to say, we're not getting many questions about the product that's been out there for 8 years. People are very familiar with it. There's a lot more information about it. Whereas the other product, people are kind of like, ooh, this is interesting. This is new. So we're seeing 2 different behavioral patterns. And so this kind of a matter when I'm talking to my leadership team, explaining it like that and saying, okay, we're seeing a lot of exploration and kind of ambiguous conversations over here on the new product side. But over here, we're not seeing a lot of engagement because these people are comfortable, they're well adopted, and there's so much information out there.
Okay, wonderful response. Honestly, the detail that you're going into here is just like blowing my mind. I'm loving this. So thank you for sharing your expertise with all of us. Our next question is from Layla again, so thank you. What counts as a re-engagement campaign?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I kind of used a very broad term there, very intentionally, because it's going to change for everyone. I've been in communities where all of a sudden, 7 years after the fact, I get a random DM that says, hey, did you forget we exist? And I'm like, no, I didn't. I just didn't need you. Or, I'll get something every week that's, sending me a reminder about, content that's happening in the community. Frankly, both of those could count as re-engagement campaigns. And so I think it really depends on what your company likes to use. I also call this out because I've worked for companies that were insanely email heavy. Things like where they're sending out, 6 emails before noon and another 12 after afternoon. And then I work for ones where I can't get them to send out a single email about community on an annual basis. So re-engagement is going to look different for each one of those companies. It has a lot to do with what your customers expect and a lot of what they'll also tolerate. I feel like that's a very non-answer, and I'm sorry. But it's really just kind of like, what does your comms look like for your company is going to tell you a lot about what a re-engagement campaign could look like.
I don't think you should say sorry. That was a great answer. It's different for every organization and every community is different. So I think that really answers the question, right? It's looking at what we're doing and saying, okay, what does re-engagement look like for us? So yeah, thank you. That was a great answer. All right, our next question is from Sam. You've built community at Zapier, Calendly, and now Times. Does this half-life pattern show up the same everywhere, or does it change depending on the product and the type of member? What a great question.
Yes, absolutely does change. So back at the beginning of my career, I was working at a company called Autodesk. They made these massive architectural software, 3D visualization stuff like 3ds Max, like the thing that all of your Pixar movies come out of, everything like that. Beautiful, stunning product, but it was interesting because the product was so complicated that every time you thought you had mastered it, it was like, haha, there's more. There's a more advanced level to it. And what was interesting was that we would see the member need would definitely decline over time. Like you would see that, but it was a much slower decline. And I think that's very interesting to mention, because then compared to a company like Calendly, where frankly, like if you use Calendly, it's easy. Like it's just easy. Like I feel kind of bad, if any of their staff is listening to this or ends up listening to this, they're gonna be like, Jillian, it's not easy. It is easy. Like Calendly is so freaking easy. Zapier and Times are definitely more complicated products. Autodesk was an insanely complicated product. So yes, the half-life pattern, the decay model tends to stay the same, but you may see things where that need at the beginning is so much significantly higher, or may go on a significantly longer time, or conversely, it could go on a very short amount of time, depending on what's happening.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Okay, next question, Emma. Jillian, how do you distinguish between someone naturally moving on because they got value from the community and someone disengaging because the community isn't meeting their needs anymore?
That's a good question. I think what I would say here is I would probably look at your community on the whole instead of trying to segment out a specific user and being like, why did they leave? Because they may not have even posted once and gotten everything they needed, or they could have not posted and just lurked and been like, this product freaking sucks. What I would generally tell you is kind of look at the behavior as a whole and say, okay, are people asking questions? You're going to look at things like the amount of time on page, and even so much as looking at the product itself. This is always an interesting one to me because I think a lot of times the bad behavior we might see in a community is very indicative of the product experience, not the community experience. I mean, I've definitely seen this. Like I was just telling someone the other day that we were talking about like, community engagement and like how there could be this peak that looks amazing, but actually that peak was because everyone was flippin' pissed that we changed something in the product. And honestly, it was a terrible change. And it caused this massive amount of engagement as people came in to tell us that we were idiots. And we were. And so I think kind of looking at it and saying, okay, what's actually happening here? What behavior am I truly seeing? At the end of the day, it's also possible, just kind of keep in mind, it may not be you. It may not be the product. It may also just be that it was the wrong time, wrong place. I've definitely had the opportunity to work for companies that were frankly 10, 15 years before their time. And, in your brain, you're like, gosh, we suck. And it's like, no, you don't. You just wrong time, wrong place. You could have had the best community, the best product. People just weren't ready for it yet.
Great answer. People just not being ready for it yet. It does sometimes happen.
Yes.
All right, our next question is from Alex. I'm curious, for someone who has inherited a community with declining engagement, what would you look at first before trying to fix anything?
Yeah, I would actually tell you that this is where, a moment ago I said, look at the problem as a whole. This is actually one where I would pull out some people from your community and ask them questions. Actually find out what's going on that I'm not seeing, because there's a solid chance that you don't have all the historical context or some of the nuances. And it's very possible the company that you're working for now doesn't even know that. When I joined Times, they had this Slack community that was absolutely doing one of these. And it was really interesting to go ask, hey, why am I seeing this? Like, what's going on? Why are people not engaging? And then trying to figure out how do we correct that as we now move into discourse was a very interesting exercise. You don't need to go talk to a ton of people, but just like talk to enough. And I would even encourage you, like if you're in a situation where your community is support-based or knowledge-based, go ask support for some positive CSAT tickets, ask for permission to go reach out to those people, find out why did you not go use community? What were your blockers? All of that stuff. Really go try to figure out, is the disengagement you? Is it the product? Is it the process? What part is actually breaking before you assume that it's your problem to fix?
That's a fantastic answer. And as someone who's been in that situation previously, can hard relate to that. I think that
Yes.
the nicest thing you can do is just ask people as well, right? Like you're saying, but also go to the advocates, not just the people who are perhaps declining or not using it. Like
Correct.
ask the advocates as well, because if they can tell you more about what they love, you can share that with the people who are perhaps not engaging and kind of drive it that way. So yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you so much. Moving on to our next question from Sam. Have you seen examples where trying too hard to re-engage members actually made the community less healthy?
Yes, I have. I definitely have. I have consulted on communities where they were leaning way too hard into comms. And this was something where, keep in mind, you're already going to get an email every time someone replies to your post or every time something you subscribe to gets an update, et cetera. Like there's already a lot of communications and notifications that come out of community. There was one community that I had been asked to consult on, where they were sending out a digest every single day. They were sending out a weekly wrap-up every single week. They were sending out things on top users. They were sending out leaderboard updates. They were just like, we don't want people forgetting about us. We want them to love us. Their heart was in the right place. But when you get to the point where you're looking at that unsubscribe button in the upper right-hand corner of your screen and you're flirting with it real hard, that's when you know you've gone too far. And so that's something really, really important that, think about. I also challenge people, think about your own behavior. Like, what is your tolerance for re-engagement? Because this is a funny one, actually. There was a product recently. What was it? Oh, I know what it is. It's my desk. So I have a Flexi Spot desk. Okay. Now, granted, they don't have a community, but just gonna throw this out there. This desk cost me like $600. All right.
Oof.
They email me 3 times a day. How many desks do you think I need to buy in like a 10-year period? I don't need three emails a day. Like it's way too much. So think about your own tolerance, think about the product, think about all of that. Really, really helps kind of make sure that you're not contributing to the less healthy customer experience.
Nice. I like that a lot. Yeah, you don't need more than one, that's for sure. Okay, so our next comment is from Patricia. There's this thing called the doorway effect, where you forget what you came for the second you walk through a door. Feels a lot like onboarding to me. People join a community for a reason that lives outside of it, and the moment they cross the threshold, that reason fades. So, is decay actually the join itself? And if it is, does that mean most onboarding is quietly making it worse by adding more steps between wanting the thing and getting it?
Yeah. Yes. I would. I didn't know that effect that I feel all the time, because I am that person. The moment I walk into a room, I stand there and go, "What am I here for?" Like I don't know. It just happens. It's bad, isn't it? Like I don't know what's up with that. So yes, I do think that's where I kind of talk about the whole getting value aspect. Let's say, for instance, so like I'll use my existing community as an example here. The Slack community was behind a registration wall. And not only was it behind a registration wall, you had to register, and then somewhere over here on my side, someone had to actually click the accept or approve button after they had a chance to look at you. That means it could be anywhere from like 1 minute to like 48 hours. I mean, let's say you asked us on the weekend to get into the community. If at 48 hours you finally get into the community, you can finally ask your question, but then you have to wait, let's say, another 12 to 24 hours to get your answer. Chances are whatever your original instigator was, your original behavioral need was, may have vanished, been self-solved, or you already forgot what it was. So it's really important to think about that barrier to entry. If someone comes into your community, make it as easy as possible for them to get what they need. And then it's okay to revisit onboarding after they get that initial value. So that's a big reason for me. Like my community right now, it is wide freaking open. You can lurk as hard as you want to. It is so easy to sign up. Once you sign up, then we're going to consider the onboarding for you. Like, we are not going to bombard you and try to make it all sorts of hard or anything like that. We make it as easy as possible to get from, gosh, I have a question. Oh, I found an answer. I now have a follow-up question. I'm going to register for the community. I'm automatically in. I can ask my question, and someone's hopefully going to get to it after I've already gotten some initial value.
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, our next question links into this point. So Layla asks, Jillian, you mentioned that onboarding is highly important to get people engaged. Do you have any advice on do's or don'ts for onboarding, especially for communities that have free membership?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing here is really think about what your customer or your user needs from that community. That is thing number one in onboarding. Okay, so like think about the thing that they're trying to get. If they need support help, it could be, here's how to ask a great question, and here's where you ask it. If they need training or education, or they want to share an idea, tell them how to do that. Like really understand what are your probably like 2 to 3 key desired customer behaviors that both align with what you want and what they want, and make sure that that is the very, very, very first thing with onboarding. What I see people do wrong all too often is onboarding is like, here's how you set your profile picture, and here's how you set up your bio, and here's how you set your notifications. And it's like, that's great, but like that was going to happen maybe a week from now once I was settled in and I already got my initial value. The fact that you're going absolutely wild telling me all the stuff I don't need to know is actually infuriating. So again, think about your own customer experience. I think about, the last time you were trying to join a community. What were you trying to do? What were you hoping to get out of it? what frustrated you and what did you find valuable?
I really like that as a piece of advice. And in my early days of running communities, I definitely did exactly what you just said and learned the hard way.
We all did, though. We all did. I mean, if you didn't write a getting started in community post and like pin it to the top, are you really a community manager?
Exactly. It's a rite of passage that we all have to go through. Okay, our final question today is from Sophia. How can community teams communicate this model to leadership when leadership still expects engagement to grow month on month?
Okay, so first thing is kick the idea of engagement out of their brain as early as you possibly can. For me, it was during my interview. My boss was like, engagement. And I went, no, like just not happening, dude. So make sure you start kicking that idea out. Don't ever put that word in any of your presentations, any of your decks. Just really, 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 really set that expectation from day one. If they are still saying that word, pull it back into language that they understand. This is where I like using customer support tickets, customer success, sales. They understand these teams because these teams have been around a long time. A lot of them even have experience in that somewhere in their career. And so kind of pulling it back and being like, okay, you don't want to see support tickets growing, right? And they're going to be like, right. And you're going to be like, okay, so we don't want to see community engagement growing past that point. Like these two should actually either be mimicking each other or we should be seeing them dropping once we have more knowledge. And so a lot of times I find that helps. Are they still going to say it to you? Yes. I mean, how many times this week have I already had to tell someone in my company no to the word engagement? 3. And it's only Wednesday. So you're going to still hear it. But the other thing here is I want you all to remember across this call right now, everyone that's listening to this, at your company, you are the expert on community. More than likely, there is no one else at your company that understands community more than you do. The same way, if you don't understand sales, there's someone there who does understand sales. Lean into your expertise. You're hired for a reason, and you are allowed to say, engagement does not represent the behavioral outcomes we are looking for in this community. Instead, I am measuring XYZ because you can say that, own it. If you need to practice in a mirror or do a power pose before you say it, you do you. But own it. Like you know what you're talking about.
What would the XYZ be? Just some examples.
Yeah, so for the communities right now that I'm working on, a big thing is we are trying to make sure that so we know that people are asking questions in Google and we know that they're getting those AI overview answers at the top. We know that people are going into LLMs. We know that they're, trying to get information from there. And we know that people are going into decentralized community and trying to find peer feedback. So for me, those are metrics that matter. I'm looking at things like Google search impressions. I'm looking at direct traffic and trying to understand, is it growing? Is it falling? What relation does it have to potential LLM usage? And really trying to kind of draw those conclusions. And that's been really interesting. So for instance, a metric that I just gave someone the other day, I said, hey, in our first 30 days of community, we have had over 8,000 page views. In comparison to the Slack community that was completely closed, this is a significant increase and indicates that people did want to lurk community, and therefore we are serving that need. And they were like, hey, that's pretty cool. But that's not an engagement stat. That's really me telling them the behavioral outcome.
Love that. So focus on the outcome. That's everyone's questions. So to everyone online who submitted them, thank you very, very much for engaging with this session, for sending those brilliant questions in. Jillian, you have been an absolute star. Thank you for joining us today and sharing your expertise. I mean, for me, that decay model, boom, my mind is blown. I've never thought about it that way before. I'm sure everyone here is the same. And I also took away something that you said early in the presentation. You said, don't wait for perfect, just get it done. I loved that. I really, really liked that. And I'll be remembering that moving forward. So yeah, we're just really grateful for the practical examples you've brought to this conversation. To everyone online, if you'd like to stay in touch, Jillian's LinkedIn is going to be available in the chat. So go and give her a follow, drop a message, say hi. And I also just wanted to let you know about community membership. So join Led by Community if you haven't already, to connect with other community builders and access resources. If you want to search for that, you can find it on www.ledby.community. And all that's left to say is, Jillian, again, thank you so much for joining us, and let's keep building these communities together. See you next time.